My name is Rebecca from Uganda. I had a near-death experience that I felt led to share with you. I will be little more details so that you will understand me and not point accusing fingers on me. The purpose of sharing this is to create aware of God's love and also comfort those who might have passed through this path of life that I walked on some years back. From as far back as I can remember, I've always felt a deep connection to God. I believed with all my heart that God was watching over me, guiding my steps, and whispering His love into my ear. As I grew older, my relationship with God deepened. I yearned to hear His voice, not just in the scriptures or through the words of our pastor, but directly, in the quiet moments of my day. It started subtly, with gentle nudges in my heart, a sense of peace when making decisions, or a quiet conviction when I needed to change my ways. I learned to quiet my mind and listen, truly listen, for His guidance. It wasn't always easy. There were times when the noise of the world drowned out His whispers, and I struggled to discern His will. But over the years, through prayer, meditation, and a lot of patience, I became more attuned to His voice. I began to recognize the distinct, gentle way He communicated with me. Sometimes, it was through a scripture that seemed to leap off the page, other times through the wise counsel of a friend, or even in the beauty of nature around me. Despite my efforts to stay close to God, there were moments when I faltered. I am only human, after all, and there were times when I ignored His guidance, thinking I knew better. Those moments often led to regret and pain, serving as harsh reminders of my need to stay attuned to His voice. Through it all, my love for God remained steadfast, and I continued to seek His presence in every aspect of my life. My journey took a beautiful turn when I met my husband, Samuel. He was kind-hearted and deeply spiritual, sharing my love for God and our faith. Motherhood soon followed, and I felt a sense of purpose as I held our first child, a son we named Joshua. A few years later, our daughter, Abigail, was born, and our family felt complete. My heart swelled with love for my children and my husband. I was determined to raise Joshua and Abigail with the same faith that had guided me throughout my life. Despite the blessings of marriage and motherhood, my journey was not without its struggles. Balancing the responsibilities of being a wife and a mother with my spiritual life was often challenging. There were days when the demands of family life left me exhausted, and my time for prayer and meditation dwindled. In those moments of fatigue and distraction, I sometimes found it difficult to hear God's voice clearly. Decisions that once felt guided by divine wisdom now seemed clouded by my own worries and desires. I struggled to maintain the same level of spiritual discipline I had cultivated in my younger years. There were times when I knew God was urging me in a certain direction, but fear or doubt held me back. I would question whether I was truly hearing His voice or merely projecting my own hopes and fears onto His will. And, like any human, I sometimes chose the easier path, ignoring the subtle whispers of guidance, only to face the consequences later. One late summer afternoon, I received news that my mother had fallen ill. She had always been the rock of our family. Without a second thought, I decided to travel to the village to be by her side. Samuel and I discussed the logistics, and it was clear that I needed to take Abigail with me, while Joshua would stay home with his father. Leaving Joshua behind was a difficult decision, but it was the most practical one. Samuel assured me that he would take good care of our son, and I trusted him completely. We arrived at my mother's village house just as the sun was setting. The small, thatched roof home brought back a flood of childhood memories, and I felt a mixture of comfort and unease. I lit a candle, so we could have light around. My mother was resting in her room, and I wanted to keep the house quiet to avoid disturbing her. As night fell, the candlelight provided a soothing backdrop as I watched her drift off to sleep. I normally made sure to extinguish any candles before bed, but tonight, I wasn't feeling sleepy. The events of the day and the worry for my mother weighed heavily on my mind. Unable to rest, I left Abigail in the room and stepped outside to the small veranda. I sat down, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and began to ponder. My thoughts wandered through the complexities of life, the challenges of motherhood, the strain of balancing faith and daily responsibilities, and the deep love I felt for my family. After about 40 minutes, a sudden, I could feel a smell jolted me from my reverie. I turned to see a sight that filled me with horror. The small thatch house where Abigail was sleeping was engulfed in flames. The fire had spread quickly, fueled by the dry grass and the breeze that had picked up during the night. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the danger my daughter was in. Without thinking, I ran toward the house, screaming Abigail's name. The flames were intense, and the heat was almost unbearable. The fire had spread so rapidly that it was already too late for me to get close. Panic and despair surged through me as I called out for help, my voice raw with fear and desperation. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by my frantic screams. They rushed over, bringing buckets of water and whatever they could find to help fight the fire. But the flames were relentless, consuming the thatched roof and wooden beams with terrifying speed. Despite their best efforts, it quickly became clear that the situation was beyond control. I stood there, helpless and distraught, as the fire raged on. My cries for Abigail grew more desperate with each passing moment. The sight of the house being reduced to ashes was unbearable, and I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and failure. By the time the flames were finally subdued, the damage was done. The entire thatch room was burnt down, and my precious daughter was lost. The grief that followed was immeasurable. I couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what had happened, and the blame I placed on myself was suffocating. The cries of my daughter echoed in my mind, and I knew that my life would never be the same again. In the days following the fire, the reality of my daughter's death settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Abigail was gone, and no amount of tears or prayers could bring her back. The neighbors who had tried to help offering their condolences and support. But no words could ease the immense pain I felt. My beautiful, innocent Abigail, who had brought so much joy into our lives, was gone forever. The guilt was relentless. I replayed that night over and over in my mind, questioning every decision I had made. If only I had been more attentive, if only I hadn't left her alone, if only I had extinguished the candle before stepping outside. The if-onlys tortured me, each one a dagger to my heart. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had failed as a mother, that my negligence had caused my daughter's death. I blamed myself for not sensing the danger, for not heeding the whispers of caution that I had learned to recognize as God's guidance. The weight of my guilt was crushing, and I found it nearly impossible to forgive myself. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Abigail's face, heard her cries, and felt the searing pain of losing her all over again. The grief and self-recrimination consumed me, leaving little room for anything else. Samuel was my rock during this unbearable time. He left everything to come to the village and be by my side. He assured me that it was not my fault, that I couldn't have foreseen the tragedy, and that Abigail's death was a terrible accident, not a result of my failure. Despite his reassurances, I struggled to believe him. The pain was too raw, the guilt too deep. Yet, Samuel never wavered. He prayed with me, for me, and over me, asking God to bring me peace and comfort. He managed the household and took care of Joshua, allowing me the space to grieve and process my emotions. His love was a lifeline. As the days turned into weeks, the darkness only grew. The constant torment of Abigail's cries, coupled with my overwhelming guilt, became too much to bear. I felt like a shadow of my former self, lost and broken beyond repair. The vibrant, loving mother I once was had been replaced by a hollow shell, consumed by sorrow and self-loathing. The thought of suicide crept into my mind, initially as a whisper, then growing louder and more persistent. It seemed like the only way to end the unbearable pain, to silence the cries and find some semblance of peace. I began to see it as a way out, a means of escape from the torment that had taken over my life. The idea of reuniting with Abigail in death became a source of twisted comfort. On January 14, 2007, the thought of ending my life solidified into a plan. The date is loud into my memory, a day marked by sound calm. I gathered a handful of pills. Without a second thought, I swallowed them, one by one, each pill a silent prayer for release. As the pills took effect, a sense of numbness washed over me. I felt myself drifting away, the world around me fading into a blur. My last conscious thought was of Abigail, hoping that in death, I could find her again and beg for her forgiveness. The darkness closed in, and I let it take me, surrendering to the void with a sense of tragic resignation. In those final moments, I believed I was finding peace, but little did I know that my journey was far from over. As the darkness took over, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The pain and sorrow that had consumed me for so long seemed to melt away. I opened my eyes and found myself floating above my body. I saw myself lying on the floor, lifeless and still, the empty pill bottle nearby. The scene was surreal, like watching a silent movie unfold before me. It was an unsettling sight, but I felt an odd sense of peace, as if the weight of my earthly burdens had been lifted. In what felt like a heartbeat, I was no longer in my mother's house. A brilliant light enveloped me, warm and inviting, drawing me upward. I felt a gentle pull, like an invisible hand guiding me toward a higher plane. The world around me transformed, and I found myself in a place of indescribable beauty and serenity. Colors were more vibrant, the air filled with a harmonious melody that resonated deep within my soul. I knew without a doubt that I was in heaven. The peace that surrounded me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The pain and guilt that had haunted me were gone, replaced by a profound sense of love and acceptance. I felt lighter, freer, as if all the chains that had bound me had been broken. My spirit soared, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude to be in this divine place. Despite the tranquility of heaven, a part of me braced for judgment. I expected to be held accountable for taking my own life, for the tragedy that had befallen Abigail. As I moved forward, I joined a line of souls, each waiting for their turn to be judged. My heart raced, and I prepared myself for the worst, fearing that my actions would condemn me. As I approached the front of the line, I saw a figure of immense authority and compassion. This was the moment I had dreaded, the moment when I would have to face the consequences of my choices. When my turn came, I stepped forward, my soul trembling with anticipation. Instead of condemnation, however, I was directed to the right, toward a path that led to a place even more radiant and glorious. The gates of heaven stood before me, glowing with a divine light. I was stunned, unable to comprehend why I was being granted entry. My heart swelled with a mix of awe and confusion as I took my first steps through the gates. As I walked through the gates of heaven, a figure approached me, radiating an aura of pure love and peace. It was Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, filling me with a sense of warmth and acceptance I had never known. His eyes held a depth of compassion that reached into the very core of my being. "Welcome," he said, his voice gentle yet powerful. "You are safe here." Tears filled my eyes as I realized I was in the presence of my Savior. I fell to my knees, overcome with emotion, but he lifted me up, embracing me with a kindness that transcended words. In his embrace, I felt a profound sense of healing and redemption, as if all my past mistakes were washed away. Jesus took my hand and guided me through heaven, showing me the wonders of this divine realm. The beauty of heaven was beyond anything I could have imagined. Lush gardens stretched endlessly, filled with vibrant flowers that seemed to sing praises with their colors. Rivers of crystal-clear water flowed serenely, reflecting the radiant light that permeated everything. We passed by countless souls, each one radiant with joy and peace. There were no words to describe the sense of unity and love that filled this place. It was a realm where every soul was deeply connected, each one basking in the glory of God's presence. Finally, he brought me to a grand hall, where a massive book rested on a pedestal. The Book of Life. Its pages glowed with a divine light, and I could sense the importance of this sacred record. Jesus opened the book, and I saw names inscribed in brilliant letters, each one a testament to a life touched by God's grace. "Look," Jesus said, pointing to a page. There, among the countless names, was mine. I stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how my name could be written in this holy book. I had expected judgment, condemnation, and yet here I was, my name shining brightly among the saved. "Why is my name here?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "After all I've done, after failing my daughter, how can I be worthy?" Jesus looked at me with infinite compassion. "It was never your fault," he said gently. "On that day, if you had been sensitive, heaven sent interventions to avert the situation, but you were not attentive to my voice. However, God's love for you is beyond. He understands your pain and your struggle. You are here because of His boundless mercy and grace." He never mentioned my act of suicide, focusing instead on the depth of God's love and His plans for all mankind. "God's intention and plan is for all men to be saved," Jesus continued. "He desires to bring every soul into His embrace, to heal and redeem each one." Then, He spoke words that would forever change me, "Become a vessel of glory." As Jesus spoke the words, "Become a vessel of glory," a surge of divine energy flowed through me. In an instant, the radiant beauty of heaven began to fade, and I felt myself being drawn back to my earthly form. The transition was seamless, a gentle pull that carried me from the divine realm back to the physical world. I opened my eyes to the sterile surroundings of a hospital room. I felt a strange mixture of confusion and clarity, as if I was waking from a dream yet fully aware of the reality I had just experienced. My body felt weak. My husband's understanding and compassion were beyond measure. He listened to my fears and doubts without judgment, offering comfort and reassurance. He held me during my countless breakdowns. His presence reminds me that I was not alone. Even when I couldn't see a way forward, Samuel believed in me and our future together. In the months following my return from the hospital, Samuel proposed an idea that would change the course of my life once again. He suggested that I further my education, to pursue a second degree. At first, I was hesitant. The thought of engaging with the world again seemed overwhelming. But Samuel, with his gentle encouragement and belief in me, convinced me that it was the right step. With his support, I enrolled in a program that both challenged and inspired me. Returning to school was daunting, but it also provided a much-needed distraction from my grief. I found myself, learning new things and engaging with people who were passionate about making a difference in the world. The intellectual stimulation and sense of accomplishment helped to stabilize my mind and bring a new sense of purpose to my life. In honoring Abigail's memory, I vowed to live a life filled with purpose and compassion, to become the vessel of glory that Jesus had called me to be. With Samuel by my side, I knew that I could achieve this, sharing our story of love, resilience, and redemption with the world.
Alright friends, this brings us to the end of today's experience. Kindly like and share this video with your friends and families. Kindly subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell icon to be the first to get updated anytime we upload a new experience sent to us. Remain blessed.